Hey guys, today we have another modern on budget deck, and this one is only $90 and it's 84.72 on MTGO, and it is a pretty sweet deck. And so it either has really good matches or comically bad matches. There's really no in between with this deck, and I think you're gonna like it. Now, this is not like an original list. I've seen lists like this. I took them and I modified them, and so this is my take on this kind of a deck. But it is modern on a budget for Affinity. Now, the purpose of this deck is you'll see that we have Memnite as a zero drop, Ornithopter as a zero drop. Um, they're not particularly important beyond just being zero drop artifacts. We have Bonesaw, we have Chimeric Mass. I like Chimeric Mass because it can possibly turn into a creature depending on what you use it, how much mana you have. Mishra's Bauble, Paradise Mantle, and Tormach's Crypt. And then we also have Welding Jar over here. And these are all zero drop artifacts. Now, you'll notice we only have 6 lands. We have 3 of each. We have this, which counts as an artifact, and it can't be destroyed. That's very nice because since we only have 6 lands, like, we don't rely on it too much, but it can't be destroyed. Sanctum of Ugin. Whenever you cast a colorless spell with mana cost 7 or greater, you may sack Sanctum of Ugin. If you do, search your library for a colorless creature card, reveal it, put it in your hand, shuffle your library. Now, that's going to come in handy quite often because if we have this, then our 7 drops over here become like amazing and give us huge turns. You will see in our sideboard, though, that we do have more lands, but that I'll explain that in a moment. We have Memnite as an early creature. We have Ornithopter as a 0/2. But I'm going to start talking about the payoffs, actually, now that we have it. Tooth of Chiskora says Affinity for artifacts. This spell costs 1 less to play for each artifact you control. So let's say I turn 1 Memnite, Ornithopter, Bonesaw. I can immediately play this for free. So that's one of the things we do, and it'll count towards Affinity for any other spells I cast. So I could go Memnite, Ornithopter, Bonesaw, Tooth into a 4-drop with Affinity, which is Frogmite. Frogmite is a 4-drop 2/2 Affinity for artifacts. Now it might be like 4 mana, 2/2. Well, you can play this on turn 1 for 0 mana, so like you'll live. Foundry Assembler is a 3/3 for 5 mana with Improvise. Your artifacts can help cast the spell. Each artifact you tap after you're done activating mana abilities pays for 1. So essentially, you can tap your artifacts on your board as if they were mana dorks to pay for this spell. They do not care about summoning sickness, by the way. Cards like this with Improvise, your card could just come out. So let's say I go Ornithopter, Memnite, Bonesaw, Tooth, and then Frogmite in that order. I have 3 creatures on the board and 2 non-creatures. They can all tap to give me a Foundry Assembler on turn 1. They could all tap on that turn that they come out. So that's very important. Next up is our bigger things that we're trying to cheat out, primarily on turn 1. First is Salvage Titan. You may sack 3 artifacts rather than paying the spell's mana cost. Exile 3 artifacts from your graveyard, or return it from your graveyard to your hand. So what you can do here is on turn 1, you can play Memnite, Ornithopter, Bonesaw, and obviously there are other 0 drops in the deck. Those are the 3 I just keep saying for some reason. But you can sack those 3 on turn 1. You can play Salvage Titan, and if your Salvage Titan gets killed, you can exile those from your own graveyard and bring your Titan right back to your hand, so you can cast it again. Next up is Barricade Breaker. Barricade Breaker is a 7-drop along with Mirror Enforcer. These 2 trigger Sanctum of Ugin to go search out another 7-drop. So if you cast one of these with Sanctum of Ugin out, you're going to get another 7-drop. Barricade Breaker is a 7/5 with Improvise that attacks each combat if able. And so it's not as good as Affinity, but you can still tap your non-creatures, and this can be a lot of damage really quickly. The only thing is that this does die to Dismember, so be careful about that. Keep in mind that this does die to Dismember, and it can be stopped. It can be stopped despite how how that artwork looks like it's just rolling by, just cruising by. Anyway, next card is Mirror Enforcer, which is a 4/4 for 7 mana, but it says Affinity for artifacts. Now, if I could theoretically I could turn 1 have if I'm on the draw, I could play 7 artifacts and then play a Mirror Enforcer. Now, this is probably for like turn 2 or turn 3 even. But those first few turns are when you're aiming to win the deck. But it's a 4/4 for 7 mana. It's not as big as the 7/5, but it does allow for you to not have to tap all your creatures to cast it, or your artifacts. Bonesaw, a way to pump up, but you're probably not getting that mana very easily. This way it's a 0-drop that can technically scale up if you need it to. When you cast it, you just need mana out. There are non-land ways to get mana in this deck, but we'll get there. Mishra's Bauble as a way to refill your hand to get a peek at your deck, their deck, but mainly just a 0-drop artifact. Paradise Mantle as a way to possibly get some form of mana, but really it's there as a 0-drop artifact. Tormach's Crypt is a 0-drop artifact, and it's probably the second biggest 0-drop artifact in the deck that is not a creature, and that's because its main board 4 cards in your deck that says exile all creature cards from target player's graveyard. And usually you'll get an idea of what your opponent's playing. Maybe you play Bauble on turn 1 with Tormach's Crypt, and you're like, and then you have Salvage Titan in your hand, and they're playing a graveyard deck. Maybe you're like, maybe I want to keep my Tormach's Crypt. Maybe I want to keep my Tormach's Crypt and sacrifice other things. Next up is Welding Jar. It's another 0-drop artifact. You can sack it to generate target artifact. So that's how you keep your creatures over here safe. Tooth of Chiscoria is a 3-mana affinity for artifacts that you can play at instant speed that taps to give a creature +1/+0. It's a way that you can pump up your creatures and another way to just get free spells. You have your lands, and then you have your sideboard. And I want to talk about the sideboard a bit because it's fairly locked in. There's not a ton you can do. I do have Darksteel Citadel for decks where maybe I want to rely more on having lands because I think I might want to just keep my creatures up. So maybe I replace some of my cards like Chimeric Mass or Bonesaw is probably bigger. I replace Bonesaws with my lands. Citadel is going to provide another land we can have. Sanctum of Ugin is going to supply another way to search out more big creatures. And Wastes is just going to be, it's in there as a third land, but also in here so that if one of our lands is destroyed, that we can go search out a basic. But it also allows us to have cards like Assassin's Trophy not affect us as much, because they might kill, well, because if we don't have any basics, Assassin's Trophy completely just destroys. It's just 2 mana, destroy target permanent. And so Wastes is a way for us, if we think our opponent's playing that, to just bring this in, and we do. It's not the greatest thing in the world, but we do get a tiny profit. Gutshot is a 0-drop burn spell. It can be used to kill creatures or get the tiny bit of damage left you need to do to your opponent, because this is very strong first, second, or maybe even third turn. But once that's over, they're going to be stuck at like 1 or 2 life if you haven't killed them yet, and this is a way to get the extra damage in. Ley Line of Sanctity is a way for your opponents to not be able to make you discard spells, because you're going to have your opening hand. It's going to be like maybe 5 0-drops, 1 Salvage Titan, and then a Ley Line of Sanctity. And if you put that Sanctity down, they cannot make you discard your Salvage Titan. Next up is Ley Line of the Void. This is another card that we can bring in against graveyard graveyard decks. And this is going to be mainly so that we can exile our opponent's grave. Well, it's for that purpose. And if we do that, then cards like decks like Storm, decks like Dredge, anything like that, just kind of gets shut down. So this is a very good way for us to combat those strategies that can try to go as fast as we do. Anyway, I hope you enjoy the deck, and if you like it, let me know below. If you have any questions on the deck, any card choices, any comments on the list, then please let me know below. If you like the video, please let me know by hitting that like button, and I will see you next time.